She was just wiping down the last classroom when she heard it, a small broken sob echoing through the empty hallways, the kind of sound that makes your heart stop, even when you're exhausted after a 12-hour shift. Maria had been cleaning this school for 15 years. She'd seen everything: kids throwing up in the cafeteria, teachers crying in supply closets, parents screaming in the principal's office. But this sound was different. This was pure fear. The hallway stretched before her like a dark tunnel. Most of the lights were already off. It was past 9 o'clock. Everyone should have been gone hours ago. Everyone except her. The invisible woman who kept their world clean while they slept. She followed the sound, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. What if something was really wrong? What if she was walking into danger? But she couldn't ignore that cry. Not when it sounded so small, so lost. There, huddled in the corner near the gym doors, was a little boy, maybe 6 years old. His Batman backpack was torn. His face was streaked with tears and dirt. He looked up at her with eyes that had already seen too much disappointment for someone so young. "Hey there, little one," Maria whispered, kneeling down slowly. She knew how to approach scared children. Her own grandson had taught her that. You make yourself small. You speak soft. You wait for them to come to you. "What's your name?" The boy hiccuped, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Tommy." His voice was barely audible. I can't find my mom." How does a 6-year-old end up alone? In a school at 9 at night? Where were the teachers, the after-school programs, the safety protocols? Maria felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. This wasn't the time. This little boy needed help, not her rage at a broken system. "It's okay, Tommy. We're going to find her together, okay?" She held out her hand, calloused from years of scrubbing and cleaning. He stared at it for a long moment before placing his tiny fingers in hers. Trust. Such a fragile thing. Such a precious gift. She could have called security. Should have, probably. That's what the employee handbook said. But the security guard had already left. Budget cuts. And calling the police might scare the boy even more. No. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Sometimes the rules don't account for the human heart. Maria led Tommy to the main office, flipping on lights as they went. The school looked different at night, like a sleeping giant. All those empty classrooms that would be full of life tomorrow. All those desks waiting for dreams to be written upon them. But tonight it was just her, a mop bucket she'd abandoned, and a lost little boy whose hand trembled in hers. The main office was locked, but Maria had keys. Another thing she wasn't supposed to have, technically. But after 15 years, people stopped noticing what the janitor could access. They just assumed she belonged everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Invisible until something needed cleaning. Invisible until someone needed saving. She settled Tommy in the principal's chair, Dr. Richards's throne, as the teachers called it. The boy's feet didn't even touch the ground. He looked so small behind that massive desk, like a king who'd inherited a kingdom too soon. Maria found some crackers in a drawer and a juice box from the mini-fridge. Emergency supplies for students who forgot lunch money. At least the school got that right. "When did you last see your mom, Tommy?" She kept her voice gentle, sitting across from him like they were having a business meeting. Kids responded better when you treated them with respect. When you didn't talk down to them. This morning. He nibbled the cracker slowly, mechanically. "She dropped me off. Said she'd be back. She always says that." The way he said always broke something inside Maria. How many times had this child been disappointed? How many promises had been broken? Maria pulled out her personal cell phone, another rule she was about to break. No personal calls during work hours. But this wasn't a personal call. This was a mission. "Do you know your mom's phone number, sweetheart?" Tommy recited it perfectly. Kids these days, they knew their parents' numbers like prayers. Just in case. Always just in case. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then straight to voicemail. Maria tried again. Same result. The silence on the other end felt heavy, ominous. "Sometimes phones die," she told Tommy, seeing the fear creep back into his eyes. "Let's try something else. Do you know your address?" He did. Of course he did. This child had been trained for abandonment, prepared for the worst. What kind of world made 6-year-olds memorize their survival information? She could drive him home, check if his mother was there. But that would mean leaving school property with a student. The liability alone could cost her this job. 15 years of perfect attendance. 15 years of being reliable, dependable, invisible. All of it could disappear with one act of kindness. But then she looked at Tommy's face. The way he clutched that juice box like a lifeline. The way his eyes kept darting to the door hoping his mother would magically appear. Some things were worth more than a job. Some moments defined who you were when no one was watching. When there were no rewards, no recognition, just you and your conscience. "Tommy, would you like me to take you home? We can see if your mom is there." The words felt dangerous leaving her mouth. Career-ending, life-changing. But sometimes the right thing to do isn't the safe thing to do. He nodded slowly. "You promise you won't leave me?" The question hit her like a physical blow. How many people had already left this child? How many promises had already been broken? Maria reached across the principal's desk and took his small hand in both of hers. "I promise, baby, I'm not going anywhere until you're safe." And she meant it, even if it cost her everything, even if tomorrow she was just another unemployed woman in a city full of them. Tonight, she was Tommy's guardian angel. Tonight, she was visible. Maria's car was 20 years old. The paint was fading. The engine made a sound that mechanics politely called character. But it ran. It got her to work every day at 5 a.m. and home every night at 10 p.m. Tonight it would be a chariot. Tonight, it would carry precious cargo. She helped Tommy into the back seat using her own jacket as a booster. Another violation, no proper car seat. But what was the alternative? Leave him at school overnight? Call the police and watch them take him to a cold facility where he'd be just another case number? No. Sometimes humanity required breaking the rules that were supposed to protect humanity. The address Tommy had given her was in Riverside Heights. Maria knew the area. It was where hope went to die, where single mothers worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make rent, where kids learned to fend for themselves before they learned to tie their shoes. She'd grown up in a neighborhood just like it. She'd escaped. But not everyone could. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past like dying stars. Tommy had stopped crying. That was almost worse. When children stop crying, it means they've accepted their pain. It means they've learned that tears don't bring help. That was a lesson no 6-year-old should know. "Do you like school, Tommy?" She needed to fill the silence, needed to keep him grounded in the present instead of lost in his fears. Sometimes. His voice was small in the darkness. "I like art class. Mrs. Chen lets me use all the colors, even the expensive ones." The way he said expensive told Maria everything. This was a child who understood scarcity, who knew that some colors, some opportunities, some dreams were reserved for others. "What do you like to draw?" Keep him talking. Keep him present. Keep him hoping. Superheroes. And my mom. Sometimes both. He paused. "She's kind of like a superhero. She works really hard. Sometimes she forgets things, but not on purpose. She loves me. She tells me every day." The defense in his voice was heartbreaking. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to defend his mother's love. Shouldn't have to convince strangers that he was wanted. The building they pulled up to was exactly what Maria expected. 5 stories of broken dreams held together by lead paint and false promises. The security door hung open. Half the windows were boarded up. This wasn't a home. This was a storage facility for humans society had decided weren't worth investing in. "Which apartment, baby?" Maria helped him out of the car. locking it 3 times. Old habit in neighborhoods like this. 312. Third floor. The elevator doesn't work. Of course it didn't. Nothing worked for people like Tommy and his mother. Everything was always just a little bit harder. Every day required just a little bit more strength than anyone should have to muster. They climbed the stairs together. Maria's knees protested. 15 years of kneeling on hard floors, scrubbing other people's messes. But Tommy's hand in hers gave her strength. Each step was a promise. Each floor was a commitment. I won't leave you. I won't abandon you. I will see this through. The hallway smelled like desperation and industrial disinfectant. Someone was crying behind one door. Someone else was yelling behind another. The soundtrack of poverty, the symphony of survival. Maria had lived this music once. She'd forgotten how loud the silence between the notes could be. Apartment 312 was at the end of the hall. The numbers were crooked. The door was scratched and dented. But there was a welcome mat. Faded and frayed, but there. Someone had tried to make this a home. Someone had fought to maintain dignity in a place designed to strip it away. Maria knocked, gentle at first, then louder. Hello? Mrs. Thompson? It's Maria from the school. I have Tommy with me. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just the oppressive silence of absence. Tommy pulled out a key from his backpack. Of course he had a key. This child was prepared for everything except being a child. The apartment was dark when they entered. Dark and cold and empty in a way that had nothing to do with furniture. There was a couch, a small TV, a kitchen table, with 2 chairs, but no warmth, no life, no mother. Mom? Tommy's voice echoed in the emptiness. He ran to the bedroom, the bathroom, the closet, checking all the places a 6-year-old might imagine a mother could hide. As if this was a game. As if she might jump out and yell, "Surprise!" and everything would be okay. But Maria knew. She'd seen this before. This wasn't hide and seek. This was abandonment. This was survival. On the kitchen counter was an envelope, Tommy's name written in shaky handwriting. Next to it, $20 and a note. Maria didn't need to read it to know what it said. She'd seen these notes before, in her neighborhood, in her childhood. Mommy had to go away for a while. Be a good boy. I love you. Always variations of the same theme. Always the same broken promise. Tommy couldn't read cursive yet. Small blessing. He held the note up to Maria. What does it say? His voice was steady. Too steady. This child had already started building his walls. Already started protecting his heart from the truth it somehow already knew. Maria's hands shook as she took the paper. How do you tell a 6-year-old that his mother chose something else over him? How do you explain addiction or mental illness or simple human breaking to someone who still believes in superheroes? You don't, you can't, you just hold them while their world reshapes itself around the absence. She had to go somewhere for help, Maria said carefully. It wasn't entirely a lie. Wherever Tommy's mother had gone, she was definitely looking for help. Just not the kind that would bring her back to her son anytime soon. She wants you to be safe. She loves you very much. I know, Tommy said simply. And maybe he did. Maybe love and abandonment could exist in the same space. Maybe a 6-year-old's heart was big enough to hold both truths. Or maybe he was just better at pretending than any child should have to be. Maria looked around the apartment. No food in the refrigerator. The electricity was on, but who knew for how long? The $20 on the counter might as well have been 20 cents for all the good it would do a 6-year-old alone in Riverside Heights. This wasn't a plan. This was desperation. This was a mother who had run out of everything except the hope that someone, anyone, would save her child. Tommy, you can't stay here alone. The words felt heavy, final, like closing a door that would never open again. I know, he said again. That terrible, resigned knowledge. Will they put me in foster care? My friend Jake went to foster care. He said it's not that bad. Sometimes. The way he was already preparing himself, already adjusting his expectations downward, already learning to settle for not that bad. Maria's mind raced. Foster care, the system, caseworkers and court dates, and temporary placements that somehow became permanent. She'd seen kids disappear into that machine. Some came out stronger. Some came out broken. Some never came out at all. Tommy deserved better. Every child deserved better. But deserving and getting were two different things in this world. "We need to get you somewhere safe tonight," she said. "Then we'll figure out the rest tomorrow." But even as she said it, she knew there was no we. Once she handed him over to the authorities, she'd become just another adult who had passed through his life. Another person who had helped for a moment and then moved on. Another face he'd struggled to remember in 10 years. Tommy packed a bag, methodically, like he'd done this before. 3 changes of clothes, his toothbrush, a stuffed dinosaur that had seen better days, a photo of him and his mother that he wrapped carefully in a t-shirt. The practiced movements of a child who had learned that you take what matters because you might not come back. "I'm ready," he announced. 6 years old and ready for whatever came next. Ready because he had no choice. Ready because that's what you did when the world kept moving and you were too small to make it stop. Maria helped him zip the bag. Her throat was tight. Her eyes burned. But she didn't cry. You don't cry in front of children who are being braver. Then you save your tears for later. For your own car. For your own pillow. For all the children you can't save and the few you try to. The drive back felt longer. Every red light was an eternity. Every turn was a decision. Maria could take him to the police station. Follow protocol. Fill out forms. Watch him disappear into a system that was overwhelmed and underfunded. Or, "Are you hungry, Tommy?" She glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He was clutching his bag like a life preserver. Like everything he was might float away if he let go. A little. 6-year-olds were always hungry. Growing required fuel. So did fear. So did being brave when you shouldn't have to be. She pulled into a 24-hour diner. Another violation. Another choice that could cost her everything. But Tommy needed food. He needed to feel normal for just a few more minutes. He needed to be a kid having a late dinner instead of a case number having a crisis. The diner was mostly empty. A few truck drivers. A nurse getting off her shift. The kind of people who existed in the margins of other people's days. The waitress didn't question why a school janitor was having dinner with a small child at 10:30 p.m. In places like this, you learned not to ask questions. Everyone had a story. Most of them were sad. Tommy ordered pancakes. Of course, pancakes were celebration food, comfort food, the kind of thing you ate when the world was supposed to make sense. Maria got coffee. Black, bitter, like the taste in her mouth when she thought about what came next. "My mom makes good pancakes," Tommy said, drowning his in syrup. "She puts chocolate chips in them. Says it's our secret ingredient. Says the best. Things in life are a little bit sweet and a little bit secret." He smiled at the memory. Still protecting her. Still holding on to the good moments like shields against the bad ones. "That sounds nice," Maria said. What else could she say? That his mother's pancakes couldn't fix what was broken? That chocolate chips couldn't sweeten a childhood marked by abandonment? Sometimes you just agreed. Sometimes you let kids keep their illusions as long as possible. "Maria?" Tommy's voice was small again. Uncertain. "Am I in trouble? Is that why Mom left? Because I was bad?" The question hit her like a punch to the gut. How many abandoned children asked themselves this question? How many spent their lives wondering what they had done wrong, as if being 6 and needing love was a crime, as if existing was something you had to earn forgiveness for? "No, baby, no." She reached across the table and took his sticky hands in hers. "This is not your fault. Sometimes adults have problems that have nothing to do with their kids. Sometimes they make choices that hurt even though they don't mean to. But it's never, ever because you were bad. You're a good boy, Tommy. You're a very good boy." He nodded, but she could see he didn't really believe her. Why would he? Actions spoke louder than words, and his mother's actions had screamed abandonment. All the reassurance in the world couldn't compete with an empty apartment and a $20 bill. "I know where we can go," Maria said suddenly. The decision made itself. Sometimes your heart chooses before your mind catches up. Sometimes you leap before you look because looking would show you all the reasons not to jump. "My sister runs a group home. It's not fancy, but it's safe, and she's good with kids. Really good. You could stay there tonight while we figure things out." It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing about this situation could be perfect. But it was better than the police station. Better than emergency foster placement with strangers. Better than leaving him alone with his pancakes and his guilt and his mother's absence. "Okay," Tommy said. So trusting. So willing to follow this stranger who had found him crying in a dark hallway. What did that say about his life? That a janitor, with kind eyes, was the safest option he had? Maria paid the check. Another $20 she couldn't really afford. But what was money compared to a child's life? What was poverty compared to doing the right thing? She'd been broke before. She'd be broke again. But she'd never be the woman who left a child behind. Never be another absence in a life already too full of them. Rosa's group home was in a better neighborhood. Not good, but better. The kind of place where people were climbing up instead of sliding down. Where hope wasn't quite dead yet. Just wounded. Just resting. The house was old but clean, painted bright yellow like a beacon. Like a promise that even in darkness, some things chose to shine. Maria hadn't called ahead, hadn't wanted to give Rosa time to say no. Sisters could be practical, like that. Could point out all the reasons why getting involved was a bad idea. All the liability, all the risk, all the ways this could go wrong. But standing on the porch at 11 p.m. with a 6-year-old refugee from abandonment, practicality seemed less important than humanity. Rosa answered the door in her robe, took one look at Tommy and didn't ask questions. That's what made her good at her job. She understood that sometimes the story could wait. Sometimes what mattered was the child standing in front of you, not the circumstances that brought them there. "Well, don't just stand there letting all the heat out," she said, ushering them in. The house smelled like cinnamon and safety, like the kind of place where children could exhale, where they could stop being brave for a few hours. The living room was worn but welcoming. Mismatched furniture that had been donated but arranged with care. Photos on the walls of children who had passed through, some smiling, some not. All of them testimony to Rosa's refusal to give up on kids the world had already written off. "This is Tommy," Maria said simply. "He needs a safe place tonight." Rosa knelt down to Tommy's level. She had the same bad knees as Maria, the same lifetime of getting down to meet children where they were. "Hi, Tommy. I'm Miss Rosa. Are you hungry? Tired? Need anything?" "I had pancakes," Tommy said, "but I'm pretty tired." The exhaustion in his voice was bone deep, the kind that came from more than just a long day, the kind that came from carrying weights too heavy for small shoulders. "Let's get you a bed then. We can sort everything else out in the morning." Rosa was already moving, already shifting into caretaker mode. She'd done this too many times, welcomed too many midnight refugees from adult failures. But she still did it with grace. Still made each child feel like they were the only one who mattered. The room she led them to had 2 beds, one already occupied by a sleeping boy about Tommy's age. "That's Marcus, he's nice, likes dinosaurs. You'll probably be friends." She said it matter-of-factly, like friendship was inevitable, like connection was still possible even after abandonment. Maybe it was. Maybe children were more resilient than the adults who kept failing them. Tommy climbed into the empty bed without complaint. He was asleep before Rosa finished tucking him in. Just collapsed into unconsciousness like his body had been waiting for permission to stop fighting, to stop being vigilant, to stop being the adult in his own life. Maria and Rosa stood in the doorway watching him sleep. 2 women who had seen too much, who had cleaned up too many messes. Maria literally, Rosa figuratively. Who kept showing up anyway, keep trying anyway, kept believing that one saved child was worth a lifetime of heartbreak. "You could lose your job for this," Rosa said quietly, not judging, just stating facts, just acknowledging the price of compassion in a world that preferred protocols, I know. And she did. But looking at Tommy's face, finally peaceful in sleep, she also knew she'd make the same choice again. Some things were worth more than job security. Some moments defined you more than any paycheck ever could. "I'll call child services in the morning," Rosa continued. "Do this right. Legal. But he can stay here until they figure out placement. I've got room. I've always got room." The sadness in that statement. The terrible mathematics of always having room because there were always more children than homes. Always more need than resources. Always more breaking than mending. They went downstairs, leaving Tommy to his dreams, hoping they were better than his reality, knowing they probably weren't. Even sleep couldn't protect children from the truth of their lives. It just gave them a few hours of reprieve before they had to wake up and face it again. Maria should have gone home. It was past midnight. She had to be back at school in 5 hours. Back to her mops and brooms, back to being invisible. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until she knew Tommy's story had a next chapter. Rosa made tea. The kind of strong, bitter brew that women who'd seen too much drank to stay upright. They sat at the kitchen table, two sisters who'd taken different paths from the same starting point, both trying to clean up the world's messes in their own way. "Remember when we were kids?" Rosa asked. "Remember how we used to promise each other we'd do better, be better, make sure no kid went through what we did?" Maria remembered. Remembered sharing a bed with 3 siblings. Remembered going to school with holes in their shoes. Remembered their mother working herself into an early grave trying to keep them fed. Remembered their father's absence like a constant ache. They'd survived, thrived even. But the scars remained. The determination to do better remained. "We are doing better," Maria said. "Maybe not changing the whole world, but changing one kid's world. That counts. That has to count. Does it?" Rosa's exhaustion showed. "I've had hundreds of kids come through here, Maria, hundreds. And yeah, some make it, get adopted, go to college, build lives. But so many don't. So many end up right back where they started. Or worse. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm just delaying the inevitable. You're giving them a chance." Maria reached across the table, took her sister's hand. "That's more than we got. That's more than Tommy would have had tonight. You can't save them all, Rosa. But you can save the one in front of you. You can be the person who showed up, who gave a damn, who proved that not every adult would abandon them. Is that enough?" Rosa's voice was small. The voice of someone who'd been fighting a losing battle for so long they'd forgotten what winning looked like. It has to be. Because what was the alternative? Stop trying? Join the ranks of adults who looked away? Become part of the problem instead of the solution? No. They were Hernandez women. They didn't quit. Even when quitting made more sense than continuing. Maria's phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor. "Where are you? Your areas aren't finished." The real world intruding. The job that paid her, bills demanding attention, the invisible woman being noticed at exactly the wrong time. "I have to go," Maria said. "But call me tomorrow. Let me know how he's doing. What happens next? You know you can't get attached," Rosa warned. "This job, my job, it only works if you care enough to help but not enough to break when you can't. Tommy's got a long road ahead. Best case scenario, his mom gets help and comes back. Worst case, well, you know the worst case. Either way, you did your part. You got him somewhere safe. That's all anyone can ask." But was it? Was doing the minimum really all anyone could ask? Or had they just gotten so used to systems failing that they'd lowered their expectations to match? Maria thought about Tommy's face when he'd asked if he was in trouble. Thought about how quickly he'd packed his bag. Thought about a 6-year-old who already knew how to survive abandonment. No, the minimum wasn't enough. Not for him. Not for any child. She drove back to school in silence. The building was still lit in places, still waiting for her to finish what she'd started. 15 years of being reliable, of showing up, of doing her job without complaint. And tonight she'd walked away. Chosen a child over a checklist. Chosen humanity over employment. The consequences would come. They always did. But tonight, a little boy was sleeping safely because she'd decided he mattered more than mopping floors. She finished her rounds as quickly as possible. Half-hearted work. Good enough, but not great. The first time in 15 years she'd given less than her best. But her best had been spent on Tommy. Her best had been used up making sure one child didn't spend the night alone and afraid. If that meant some classrooms weren't perfect tomorrow, so be it. Some messes were more important to clean up than others. The next morning came too soon. Maria had managed 3 hours of sleep, 3 hours of dreams filled with abandoned children and empty apartments, 3 hours of rest that felt more like punishment than reprieve. But she showed up. 5 a.m., just like always. Because that's what you did. You showed up even when showing up hurt. The school was already buzzing with early morning energy, teachers arriving with their coffee and lesson plans, the breakfast crew preparing to feed kids who might not eat again until tomorrow, the beautiful, chaotic machinery of education grinding into gear. And somewhere in this building was a principal who didn't know that his janitor had saved one of his students last night. Didn't know that while he slept in his comfortable bed, she'd been driving through dangerous neighborhoods and making impossible choices. She was cleaning the main hallway when Dr. Richards arrived. Early as always. The kind of principal who believed in being first in, last out. She respected that about him, even if she didn't always agree with his policies, even if sometimes she thought he'd forgotten what it was like to be poor. To be invisible. To be a child who needed more than test scores and dress codes. "Morning, Maria," he said, barely glancing at her. The same greeting every day. Polite but distant. The appropriate relationship between a principal and a janitor. Between someone who made decisions and someone who cleaned up after them. "Morning, Dr. Richards." She kept mopping, kept her head down, kept being what he expected. What everyone expected. The reliable, invisible woman who kept their world clean. But inside, she was screaming. Inside, she wanted to grab him by his expensive suit and tell him about Tommy. About all the Tommies who fell through the cracks while he worried about standardized tests and budget meetings. The morning progressed normally. Kids arriving in waves. Some eager, some reluctant. All of them carrying invisible backpacks full of their home lives, their struggles, their secrets. Maria watched them all differently now. Wondered how many were one bad day away from being Tommy. How many were already living his story but hadn't been discovered yet. It was during second period when everything changed. Maria was emptying trash in the teacher's lounge when she heard the commotion. Raised voices from the main office. Dr. Richards' door slamming. The kind of disturbance that meant something significant had happened. Something that couldn't be, handled quietly. She shouldn't have eavesdropped. Another rule. Another line she was about to cross. But she recognized one of the voices. Mrs. Patterson, the school social worker. The one who was supposed to catch kids like Tommy before they ended up alone at night. The one who was chronically overworked and underfunded. The one who tried her best in a system designed for failure. Found alone in the building after hours. Mother abandoned him. Janitor took him. Fragments of conversation drifting through closed doors. Her story. Tommy's story. Being dissected by people who hadn't been there, who hadn't seen his tears, who hadn't felt his small hand trembling in theirs. Then Dr. Richards' voice, clear and angry. Find out which janitor. Find out why they didn't follow protocol. This is a liability nightmare. We could be sued, the school could be shut down. I want answers, and I want someone held accountable. Accountable. Such a clean word for such a messy situation, as if accountability could be measured in employee handbooks and insurance policies, as if the real crime here was saving a child instead of abandoning him. Maria's hands tightened on her mop handle. 15 years of being invisible, And the one time she'd allowed herself to be seen to matter, it would cost her everything. But then she thought about Tommy, safe at Rose's, fed, warm, alive. If losing her job was the price for that, it was a bargain. Some things were worth more than money. Some choices defined you more than any employment record ever could. She'd been poor before. She could be poor again. But she'd never be the woman who left a child behind to save her own skin. The summons came at lunch. Not from Dr. Richards directly. He didn't summon janitors, but from his secretary, delivered with the kind of sympathetic look that meant everyone already knew. The invisible woman was about to become very visible. And visibility in situations like this rarely ended well. Maria changed out of her work clothes, put on the one good outfit she kept in her locker for emergencies, her court appearance clothes, her funeral clothes, her please see me as human clothes. Because even now, even knowing what was coming, she maintained her dignity. Her mother had taught her that. You might lose everything else, but you never lose your self-respect. Dr. Richards' office hadn't changed since last night when she'd sat there with Tommy. Same massive desk, same walls full of degrees and commendations, same smell of authority and distance. But now she was on the other side. Now she was the problem to be solved, the liability to be addressed, the person who had broken the rules in a world that valued rules over lives. Sit down, Maria. He didn't look at her, focused on papers on his desk, probably her employment record. 15 years condensed into a few pages. 15 years of perfect attendance and satisfactory reviews about to be overshadowed by one night of choosing humanity over policy. I understand you removed a student from school property last night without authorization. His voice was careful, legal, the voice of someone who'd already consulted with lawyers, who'd already decided how this would end. Is this true? Yes. Simple. Direct. No point in lying. No point in explaining. He wasn't asking for her story. He was building a case. You understand this is a serious violation of school policy? That you exposed this institution to significant liability? That you could have been accused of kidnapping? That the child could have been hurt in your care? Each question a nail in her professional coffin. Each one technically true and completely missing the point. The child was already hurt, Maria said quietly. He was abandoned, alone, scared. I made sure he was safe. That wasn't your job. Dr. Richards finally looked at her, really looked at her. And for a moment she thought she saw something human flicker in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by administrative necessity, by the need to protect the institution over the individual. Your job is to clean this school, not to make decisions about student welfare. We have protocols for situations like this. Professionals who are trained to handle these cases. Where were those professionals at 9 p.m.? The words escaped before she could stop them. 15 years of silence breaking like a dam. Where were they when Tommy was crying in the dark? When his mother left him with nothing but $20 and a note? Where were all these protocols when a 6-year-old needed help? That's not the point. Then what is the point? She was standing now. When had she stood up? That I saved a child but didn't fill out the right forms? That I chose compassion over bureaucracy? That I acted like a human being instead of an employee? Fine, fire me. But don't sit there and pretend that following your protocols would have been better for Tommy. Don't pretend that your system works when we both know it's broken. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Richards wasn't used to being challenged. Certainly not by janitors. By invisible people who were supposed to clean up messes, not point them out. But Maria was done being invisible. Done pretending that policies mattered more than people. Done acting like her 15 years of service meant less than one night of services rendered. I'm not firing you, he said finally. The words surprised them both. But you're suspended 2 weeks without pay, and when you come back, if you come back, you follow the rules, every time. No exceptions, is that clear? 2 weeks without pay. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, it might have been a death sentence. Maria did the math in her head as she walked out of Dr. Richards's office. Rent, utilities, food, gas. The careful balance of poverty that required every dollar to be accounted for. 2 weeks would drain her meager savings, would put her one emergency away from disaster. But Tommy was safe. That had to be worth something. That had to be worth everything. She gathered her things from her locker. 15 years of accumulated life. Photos of her nephews. A spare pair of shoes. The book she read during breaks. Amazing how little evidence there was of a life spent in service to others. How easily she could be erased from this place. How quickly invisible could become non-existent. The other janitors avoided her eyes as she left. They knew. Word traveled fast among the invisible. Maria Hernandez had broken the cardinal rule. She'd made herself seen. She'd stepped out of her lane. She'd acted like she mattered. And now she was paying the price. They felt bad for her, but they also feared her. Feared the reminder that their jobs hung by threads. That their invisibility was their only protection. The drive home felt different. The city looked different when you were unemployed. When you were suspended. When you were suddenly on the outside looking in. Every help-wanted sign became a possibility. Every business became a potential future. Every bill became a threat. This was the precarious nature of working poverty. One mistake, one act of kindness, one moment of humanity, and everything could crumble. Her phone rang as she pulled into her apartment complex. Rosa, the real world calling. The reminder that Tommy's story hadn't ended when she'd been suspended. That children's lives continued even when adult employment stopped. Child services came, Rosa said without preamble. They're placing him with a foster family. Good people, I know them. They'll take care of him while they look for his mother. The unspoken truth hung between them. While they looked for a mother who didn't want to be found. While they pretended there was a happy ending waiting when everyone knew. Better. Can I see him? Before he goes? Maria knew the answer before she asked. She wasn't family, wasn't a legal guardian, wasn't anything but a janitor who'd gotten involved, who'd crossed lines, who'd complicated a simple abandonment case with messy, human emotion. I don't think that's a good idea, Rosa said gently. He's asking for you. Keeps talking about the nice lady who saved him. But seeing you again, it might make it harder. He needs to move forward, attach to his new placement, start building new connections, of course. Clean breaks, professional boundaries, the kind of emotional distance that made the system function. The kind that protected workers from burning out, from caring too much, from breaking under the weight of all the children they couldn't save. Maria understood she hated it, but she understood. Will you tell him something for me? Her voice was thick, heavy with unshed tears. With the weight of caring too much in, a world that rewarded caring just enough. Tell him he's a good boy. Tell him none of this was his fault. Tell him he matters. Even if it doesn't feel like it. Even if the world keeps telling him otherwise. He matters. I'll tell him. Rosa's voice was gentle, understanding. The voice of someone who'd delivered too many messages to too many children who deserved better. Maria, you did the right thing. Whatever happens with your job, with everything else, you did the right thing. But did she? As Maria sat in her apartment staring at bills she couldn't pay, at a future suddenly uncertain, she wondered. The right thing had a price. The right thing had consequences. The right thing left you suspended without pay, while the wrong thing, ignoring a crying child, would have left you employed and stable. What kind of world punished compassion and rewarded indifference? Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She almost didn't read it, almost deleted it, but something made her look. Thank you for saving my son. I'm getting help. I'll come back for him. Please don't give up on us. T's mom. Maria stared at the message, at the promise it contained, at the hope it represented. Maybe it was real. Maybe Tommy's mother would get clean, get help, get her son back. Maybe this story would have a happy ending after all. Or maybe it was just another pretty lie. Another promise that would be broken. Another disappointment waiting to happen. But, for Tommy's sake, she chose to believe, chose to hope. Because what else was there? The 2 weeks passed slowly. Maria applied for jobs. Interviewed at places that paid less and demanded more. Smiled at managers half her age who looked at her like she was already a ghost. 50-year-old janitors weren't in high demand, especially ones with suspensions on their record. Especially ones who might choose children over checklist again. She thought about Tommy constantly, wondered if he was adjusting to his foster home, if he was making friends, if he still blamed himself, if he remembered the woman who'd found him, crying in a dark hallway and refused to leave him behind. She hoped he did, hoped he remembered that someone had chosen him, even if just for one night, even if it had cost everything. Rosa called with updates when she could. The foster family was good. Tommy was enrolled in therapy. His mother had entered rehab. The system was working the way it was supposed to. Slowly, imperfectly, but moving forward. It should have been comforting, should have validated Maria's choice. But all she could think about was how none of it would have happened if she'd followed the rules. If she'd called security and gone back to mopping. Tommy would have spent the night alone. Would have woken up abandoned. Would have entered the system traumatized and broken instead of fed and safe. On the 13th day, her phone rang. Dr. Richard's secretary, asking her to come in, to meet with the principal before her suspension ended. Unusual, potentially bad, or potentially... Maria didn't dare hope. Hope was expensive when you were poor. Hope was dangerous when you were vulnerable. But it crept, in any way. Stubborn, persistent, human. She wore her good outfit again. The one that said she was more than just a janitor. More than just the invisible woman who cleaned up after others. She arrived early. Sat in the parking lot watching the school wake up. Watching the life she'd been part of for 15 years continue without her. It was humbling. How easily replaced she was. How quickly the world moved on. But also, liberating. If she was so easily erased, maybe she could be easily rewritten. Maybe this was a chance to become visible on her own terms. Dr. Richard's office felt different this time. Less intimidating. More human. He looked tired, older, like the past 2 weeks had aged him. Like maybe he'd been doing some thinking of his own. Some questioning of systems and protocols and the price of following rules. Sit down, Maria. This time he looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw her. I owe you an apology. The words hung in the air. Unexpected. Unprecedented. Principals didn't apologize to janitors. Administrators didn't admit fault to support staff. The hierarchy didn't allow for such reversals. But here they were, 2 humans in a room, both trying to navigate a broken system, both trying to do right in a world that made right complicated. I've been thinking about what you said about Tommy, about that night, about what would have happened if you'd followed protocol. He paused, struggled. A man used to certainty suddenly discovering doubt. You were right. The system failed that child. Would have continued failing him if you hadn't intervened, and I punished you for it. For doing what any decent human being should do. Maria waited. 15 years of practice at being silent, at letting others speak, at existing in the spaces between words. But this silence felt different, felt pregnant with possibility, with change, with the potential for visibility that didn't cost everything. I'm ending your suspension, effective immediately, with back pay and... He paused again, gathered himself, made a decision that would ripple outward in ways neither of them could predict. I'm creating a new position, evening student advocate, someone who's here when the official support systems aren't, someone who can make decisions, take action, be the safety net for kids like Tommy. I want you to consider it. Same pay, different responsibilities, a chance to do officially what you did unofficially that night. The offer sat between them. Unexpected, transformative, a chance to be visible, to matter, to save other Tommies without risking everything. Maria felt tears threatening. 15 years of being invisible, and suddenly she was being seen, being valued, being asked to step into the light. "I'll need training," she said carefully. "Certification, support, I can't just, you'll have it. Whatever you need. Mrs. Patterson will work with you, help you learn the official channels while maintaining the humanity you showed that night, the instinct to act, to care, to see children as more than case numbers." He smiled, a real smile, the first she'd ever seen from him directed at her. "You were right, Maria. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't the safe thing. Sometimes protocol needs to make room for compassion." She said yes. Of course she said yes. How could she? Not, how could she turn down the chance to be the person she'd always been, but with support, with recognition, with the power to help without hiding? It wasn't a perfect solution. The system was still broken. Children would still fall through cracks. But maybe, just maybe, she could catch a few of them. Could be the net that appeared when everything else failed. 6 months later, Maria stood in the same hallway where she'd found Tommy. But everything was different now. She wasn't pushing a mop bucket, wasn't invisible. She wore an ID badge that said Student Advocate. She had an office, small, cramped, shared with the copy machine. But hers. A place where children could come when they needed help, when they were scared, when the world was too big and they were too small. She'd helped 17 kids so far, 17 Tommies who might have fallen through the cracks. Some needed food, some needed shelter, some just needed someone to see them, to tell them they mattered, to prove that adults could be trusted, that the world, despite all evidence to the contrary, still had people who cared. Tommy's case had resolved better than most. His mother had completed rehab, had gotten her job back, had fought for and won custody again. They were living in a better apartment now, still struggling, still fragile, but together. Maria saw them sometimes. Tommy would run to hug her, would tell her about school, about his art, about how his mom was doing better, how they were both doing better. "You saved us," his mother had said once quietly, ashamed but grateful. "When I left him, I was so lost, so broken. I thought he'd be better off without me. But you made sure he was safe. You gave me time to get help, to get better, to become the mother he deserved." Maria never took credit, never said it was just her job, because it wasn't. It was more than that. It was the choice to see, to act, to care, the choice that every person faced when confronted with someone else's pain. Look away or lean in. Follow protocol or follow conscience, be safe or be human. The school was different now too. Subtle changes, important changes, later hours for support staff, emergency funds for families in crisis, training for all employees on recognizing and responding to at-risk students. Dr. Richards had become an unexpected ally, a principal who'd remembered why he'd gone into education in the first place, who'd rediscovered that test scores mattered less than lives saved. "Any problems tonight?" he asked, stopping by her office on his way out. Another new routine, checking in, making sure she had what she needed, treating her like the professional she'd always been but had never been recognized as. "Nothing I can't handle," Maria assured him. And it was true. She could handle whatever came, because she wasn't alone anymore, wasn't invisible, wasn't just a janitor cleaning up messes. She was a guardian, a protector, a catcher of falling children. As the building emptied, Maria did her rounds, not with a mop bucket, but with purpose, with visibility, with the knowledge that somewhere in this school might be another Tommy, another child teetering on the edge, another life that could be saved or lost depending on who was paying attention, who was willing to act, who understood that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness created the biggest changes. She thought about her own journey, from invisible janitor to visible advocate, from following rules to following conscience, from cleaning up messes to preventing them. It hadn't been easy. Change never was. But it had been worth it. Every suspended paycheck, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. Worth it for Tommy's smile, for his mother's second chance, for the 17 other children who'd been caught before they fell. The hallway where she'd found Tommy had become her favorite spot. A reminder, a monument to the night everything changed. The night she'd chosen visibility over invisibility, humanity over protocol, love over fear. She stood there now, remembering that small, broken sob, that frightened child, that moment of decision that had redirected multiple lives. Thank you. The voice was quiet, unexpected. Maria turned to find Mrs. Patterson, the social worker, the one who'd been overwhelmed, overworked, trying to hold back an ocean with her bare hands. For what you did, for what you do, for showing us that the system only works when people are willing to break it, to remake it, to demand better. They stood together in the hallway. Two women who'd dedicated their lives to saving children, who'd learned that sometimes salvation came from unexpected places, from janitors who refused to be invisible, from principals who remembered their purpose, from schools that chose to be more than test scores and budgets, from people who understood that every child mattered, every story deserved a better ending. Every Tommy deserved someone who would choose them over everything else. The school was quiet now, empty except for the ghosts of children's laughter, the echoes of lessons learned, the promise of tomorrow's possibilities. Maria smiled. Somewhere, out there, Tommy was doing homework, drawing superheroes, believing in second chances because someone had believed in him. And tomorrow, she'd be here, visible, ready, waiting for the next child who needed saving, the next life that needed redirecting, the next small act that would change everything, because that's what heroes did. Not the comic book kind that Tommy drew, but the real kind, the ones who showed up, who saw pain and moved toward it instead of away, who chose compassion over comfort, who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to be invisible, refuse to follow rules that hurt people, refuse to let children fall through cracks that shouldn't exist in the first place. Maria turned off the lights, locked the doors, went home to her small apartment that she could now afford to keep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new Tommies, new choices between protocol and humanity. But she was ready, had always been ready. She just hadn't known it until a small boy's tears had shown her who she really was, not just a janitor, not just an employee, but a guardian of the forgotten, a voice for the voiceless, a light in dark hallways where children sat alone, waiting for someone to find them. And she would find them, everyone she could, because that's what love looked like in action. That's what humanity looked like when it refused to hide. That's what happened when one person decided that a child mattered more than a job, more than safety, more than anything except the basic truth that every human being deserved to be seen, to be saved, to be told they weren't alone, even when the world insisted otherwise, especially then. The city lights blurred past as she drove home. Each one, a life, a story, a potential Tommy waiting for someone to care. The world was big. The problems were bigger. But change started small, with one janitor, one child. One night when the rules bent far enough to let love through. And love, Maria had learned, was the most powerful janitor of all. Cleaning up messes, that policy couldn't touch. Fixing breaks that protocol couldn't reach. Saving lives that systems had already written off. Tomorrow she'd do it again. And the day after. And the day after that. Because that's what heroes did. They showed up. They stayed visible. They chose love over fear. Every single time. Even when it cost everything. Especially then. Because some things were worth more than safety. Some moments mattered more than months. And some children, like Tommy, just needed someone to see them in the dark, to take their hand, to promise not to let go. to prove that in a world full of leaving, someone would always choose to stay. Like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. This channel is for those who believe in the power of small acts to change lives.